Bonjour à tous. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, sort of. Traveling too, yeah.
Hello. Yes.
Are you still traveling now, Azren?
No,
Or
I'm
are you back in
back.
Canada?
I got back about 2 days ago in
Oh,
Canada.
same
Just
for
got
me. Got back on
back.
Tuesday.
Oh,
So,
me too. There you go.
okay, yeah.
Tuesday night.
Yeah, and it feels as like Tetsu was saying, everything goes back so quickly. Now it feels like the trip was ages ago. But
Yeah.
uh,
It's
no,
crazy to think that I was less than a week ago. I was in in Taiwan. It's crazy to think, oh yeah, I was in a different bed. I was living with the family. Like they were different. Like it's completely different. And it's less than a week
Okay,
ago. It doesn't
hang
crazy.
on, hang on. I am being told that
sounds
the sound is
seemingly
not
isn't so great. I mean, it's fine on my end, but
okay. Can everybody hear us on Facebook? Actually, yes. On my test screen, I see that we can that the sound is going through on both Facebook and YouTube. I mean, want to remind our
okay.
audience we are live both on Facebook and on YouTube. Perhaps Drew Peterson gave us this comment. Thank you, Drew, for the comment. I don't know if it's the setting on your side. Perhaps if you go to our LangFest YouTube channel, you could find us live there also at the same time. So sorry to cut you guys off.
Yeah. No, no, no. It's important. I mean, it makes no sense to keep talking if people can't hear us. But
That's right. If everybody, I mean, we have a few, I have a few members that are watching right now,
oh,
and Drew
says it's back
confirmed that
now,
it's
so
back.
it
This
seems
is
to be okay. All
perfect.
right. So I guess we can keep just resume what we were talking about. So yeah, I mean, being on trips, it's a weird feeling when you're back.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I don't really have jet lag in a traditional sense. Like I'm sleeping at normal times, I'm waking up at normal times. The only jet lag I'm experiencing is every day I have very little concept of what day and time it is.
Mm.
So yeah, on Wednesday I went to a pub with some friends and I legitimately thought it was like a Friday or a Saturday. And I was like,
Two
oh yeah, it's
days.
a day.
Wow.
Like of course we can't stay out that late. It's Thursday tomorrow.
So can you tell us a little bit what your whole itinerary or trip was? Because I saw on Facebook that it wasn't only Asia, that you were in Europe prior to that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so
Excuse me, my throat's a little bit funny, but um, I was primarily in Taiwan. So
okay,
Taiwan for 5 weeks, France for 2 weeks. Basically, what ended up happening, it's a weird flight path when you think about it. It's a two very strange countries to choose for a single trip because they're not really close to each other. But what happened was that I had a free flight because I have in Canada we have the Air Miles card, so I had enough Air Miles for a free flight basically. I haven't been to France for, well, aside from this trip, 7 years. So I thought, okay, I should probably go back, especially since I have a free flight. So I went to France for 2 weeks, visited a friend of mine, and then went to Taiwan for 5 weeks, where I studied Mandarin.
all right.
Oh, that's
And
good.
which cities did you go to in both France and Taiwan?
So France, I was in Paris, and then I went up north to Lille. I went to Berg. I went to Dunkerque. We went to a very small village
Yeah.
where you lived. I lived in this small village about 11 or 12 years ago. So we went and visited that family that I lived with again. Um, and then in Taiwan, it was almost all Taipei because I was studying and I was teaching English to my homestay family, and so it was just mostly in Taipei with a little bit of travel outside. So we went to Taichung, and then actually that might have been the only other city I visited apart from Taipei this time. So
Well, it's a small island. I mean, there's You know, could have in 5 weeks. There were quite a lot of places you could have visited, but it was hot during
Well,
the
it's
whole
not the
time.
heat. It's more that I only had. Oh, that's not true. I also went to. Where else did I went to 2 cities, I thought. I went to 3 cities. No, I went to two. Only two.
All right.
I think it was just that I only had weekends to travel, and
Okay.
so I didn't always head out, and not even the full weekend, to be honest, because I had to be back by the Monday, and I couldn't leave until Friday evening.
All
So I'd be
right.
back Monday morning and leave Friday. So it's kind of a weird
But
time.
before we continue, we do have quite a lot of people coming up right now, sending us comments and hello. So I want to first acknowledge that, and then we can continue with your adventures. So again, we had Drew who gave us a little comment about our audio, and we're glad that it's now all back. And William Ramos from Brazil, hello, hello. And we have Cara that we know very well. Nice to meet you again. And Priscilla, we've had a few exchanges by email, and she's asking whether all the conferences presentations will be only in English, and we can confirm right away it will not all be in English. In fact, we have one track that is dedicated to English, and the other track is dedicated to mostly French, or all French. I don't
Actually,
remember.
right now, I think the last it's going to be the second track is all French.
Is
So
all
I think
French.
I think we could say about half of the talks will be English and the other half will be French.
Yeah, and we do have workshops during which there will be interactions with the presenters, and quite a few of them are polyglots, and I think part of the workshops could be in different languages. So you can expect many languages at this event, definitely. And Priscilla also is asking whether there will be Portuguese speakers at the event. What do you think?
There will be.
Yes, that is
Yeah.
a definite yes. There will be Portuguese speakers, Spanish speakers, German speakers, of course,
And
French
many
and
more.
English,
Yeah, exactly.
and the list just goes on. So come along. I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun. And we also have our old friend Patrick Curry also joined. So hello to everybody. Now let's get back to our discussion. So we were talking about Azren spending 5 weeks in Taiwan, but we don't know yet who's Azren. I mean, you call yourself the language nerd, so let's get some background, and then the whys of your traveling to France, and why Taiwan. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Azren, you and your channel.
Sure.
And your
Sounds good. So my name is Azren, aka Azren the Language Nerd, or you can also find me under Polyglot Azren. Both you'll find me under both. Obviously, I like speaking and learning languages. So I currently speak English, French, and Spanish quite fluently. With my family, I speak in a language called Gujarati, which is from India. And then I've been learning Mandarin for about little under 5 years now. I've been learning Mandarin part-time. Currently I teach languages locally in Calgary, which is where I live. So I don't work in a school. I work for myself, so I'm self-employed. Usually I work with mostly adults, running group classes for English, French, and Spanish learners, and then also running different events for language learners. So whether it be coffee and conversation events, whether it being pub nights, whether it being something around the holiday seasons, like different potlucks or different things like that. So basically just trying to foster a language learning community in Calgary where I live. And then online, I try to share my language learning journey. My whole thing is I'm trying to learn 8 languages at a very advanced level.
Okay, why 8?
Lifetime. It was an arbitrary list that I made when I was about 17 years old. Arbitrary. I just looked at the world map, thought about what languages would kind of knock off a good chunk of the map, and then said, okay, that sounds good. And then,
so what is the list then? I mean, I'm sure French and Spanish and Mandarin, so are 3 that are part of it. So what are the other 5?
So it's English, French, Spanish, Mandarin, Hindi, Gujarati, Russian, Arabic. And then I will probably add a 9th because I don't have, aside from, I guess, Arabic, I don't really have any other African languages. So I thought, well, should probably add an African one in there. So at some point I'll probably add a ninth, but
Okay.
that's
Russian
most
and
of it.
Arabic and Chinese, right?
Mhm.
Or Mandarin Chinese. These are sort of languages that are not immediately within your living context, and you've
Mhm.
decided to go out and pick these up. You sort of mentioned continents and whatnot. What are your motivations to really learn these languages? I mean, Gujarati I can understand, it's in your family. English, French, I mean, being in Canada. Spanish is also a very it's a major language in North America, so I can see those. But Mandarin, and then now you're talking about Arabic and Russian.
Nowadays, it's just that it's something I decided such a long time ago. It was about 10, 11, 12 years ago, where I decided, these are the languages I'm going to learn. And it's been something that's never really gone away. It's not really a motivation thing. It's just that I really enjoy it. And so
So
it's
so
something fun to have on my plate.
I hope I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but I know when I follow your videos and whatnot, you talk a lot about motivation and reasons to learn languages. So that's sort of what I'm trying to get at with Arabic and Russian. Is there a set motivation that's going to allow you to bring it to a high level? Because you are aiming for 8 levels at a very high level, correct?
Yeah, for sure.
And
I
why
think
these?
let's start here. I haven't started Russian and Arabic. I haven't started them yet. Let's start there. But I think for me personally, usually when I'm learning a language, I'm motivated by praise and competition.
Okay.
Those are things I'm often motivated by. So praise in the sense of I like when native speakers say, "Oh wow, your pronunciation's good," or "Oh wow, I'm surprised that you're able to do that grammar point really well. Like most foreigners can't." Or, "I'm surprised you can roll your R's." A lot of people I like that praise.
Okay.
And then competition as well. So
Competition.
I
Okay.
like it when I'm in, let's say in a classroom environment and there's people who are studying with me and they're doing really, really well. And I feel like, I think they're progressing faster than me, or, oh, wow, I think, that person's definitely more advanced than me right now. And I get competitive and I want to catch up with them.
I think these are, I mean, all answers are good. These are less common answers compared to, but I think it's good because I think they're for you and the way you're explaining it. I think they're very honest answers, and I think it's, I mean, these are motivations for a lot of people in life in general. So I mean, why not in language learning as well? It's even though it's not something perhaps for many people they have these kind of motivations, but they're not very comfortable talking about them because I think some people will sometimes view that, or some people are less into competition than others. And I mean, obviously you are as a motivator, like I said, I mean, it's a motivator, I think, for a lot of people in a lot of life's endeavors. But I think it's cool to hear, those that kind of an answer that you don't hear every day. At least I haven't heard it from a lot of polyglots, but I'm sure you're not alone.
Yeah, when you first said competition, I was sort of thinking more about the number of languages. There are.
No. So that's sort of I'm the complete opposite. Like I'll never. I don't think I'll be someone who speaks. Like I would much rather. How do I explain? So I would much rather speak a small number of languages very, very well than a large number at a conversational level.
Okay.
So I'd rather speak like 3 languages really well than 8 conversationally.
Okay. Well, that's
it's already pretty yeah.
And it's all a matter of taste. What you like, because there's really no defining point for fluency or depth or so. Some people,
I mean, it even varies by topic, right? I mean, there's
exactly
many things that you're comfortable talking about in one language that you wouldn't be. You don't have the vocabulary or practice in another one. So I mean, it's so hard to define.
Yeah. I think for me, I was having an interesting conversation about this with a friend of mine in Taiwan. We were studying together. She's from Florida, she's from the States, and we were discussing why each of us are trying to, what level we're trying to achieve in Mandarin at the end of the day and what we're trying to work towards. So my friend said, well, I would like to eventually be at a very fluent level, in the sense where if you throw me with a bunch of Mandarin speaking people, in most scenarios that you'd come across on a day-to-day basis, most conversations you'd come across, whether it's deep topics, whether it's not, I would feel comfortable conversing with them, even though I won't always know every word, and I might have to ask different questions, things like that. I might make some mistakes. Generally speaking, I feel comfortable in any kind of or most situations you come across. For me, it's similar, but I think for me, my North Star is when I speak to you, you should think that if you were to close your eyes, you would think I'm from your country.
Okay.
So that is a similar kind of goal. It's very similar to my friends. The difference is that accent plays a much more important role in pronunciation. And then a focus on being grammatically correct, and actually not grammatically correct, speaking in a way that someone from that country.
Native-like.
So.
Well,
yeah.
that can be tricky. I mean, especially like Spanish. You've got so many countries speaking Spanish in different dialects and different accents. So, but
picking one, like I'm okay with picking one, and something like, oh wow, you really sound like you're from insert country here.
Good. And how do you do that? I'm sure many people learning languages, they understand that you can get to a very high level with the grammar and the vocabulary and whatnot, but some people don't really know how to go about correcting their accents. Is there a little trick that you use?
For me, I usually it's something I start with right at the beginning. Like I try to get the pronunciation down as early on as possible. I find that it's when you have the good habits from the beginning, it's easier. And it's a lot of practice with the pronunciation, making sure that the same way that someone might do conversation practice or reading practice, or maybe worksheets if you're in a classroom, or maybe whatever it is, they're doing whatever practice they're doing specific practice around pronunciation and the sounds of the language.
So I think it's a reasonable to have the pronunciation right from the beginning. A reasonable goal to have at the beginning, because you often hear from people that even if you're not very good at a language or you're starting, if your accent is really good, you will come across as much better than you actually are. And I've sort of experienced this because it so happens that one of the things that I seem to be able to pick up fairly easily when I acquire a new language, it turns out, is the pronunciation. So, for instance, I was in Germany for a bit last week, and my German, honestly, is intermediate. Maybe it's B1 on the European reference framework. So it's conversational, but not very strong. But I think I think I pronounce it. I think my accent is pretty okay, and that will often put me in a situation where people will just blurt out something very complicated after I've started talking to them, because they think because I pronounce the language well that my level is higher than it is. In particular, in terms of vocabulary, my vocabulary in German is functional, but there's a lot of gray areas or things that I'm not sure about. So that, but if you want to pass for a native speaker, someone who's very good, even at an early stage, I think getting the pronunciation right is one of the key aspects, possibly more than anything else.
Yeah, and I think for passing like a native speaker, even if it's something very similar, sometimes like it's I don't know if impossible is the word, but it's very difficult to always consistently 100% of the time be at a point where you sound like a native speaker. Like that's something that you're reaching for the stars. Like even in French, after almost 22 years of doing French, like there's still things I'll say. Like when I was in France for 2 weeks, I guess it would have been in May. When I was in France for 2 weeks, I have like a note file on my phone of probably 50 different things I learned that I didn't know. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. So it's a forever process. That's never, like it's never a point where like, all right, I'm like someone who's been born and raised in Quebec or France or whatever, whatever country. Like that's difficult. But
But speaking of
Um,
Quebec and France, the accent, which one are you trying to take in, or are you
in French?
taking
Oh, so
both?
I'm stuck with a French accent.
Okay, you're stuck.
What I mean is, so it's because so when I was a teenager, I studied in France. At
Okay.
the time, I had more of a, I suppose you could say, a bit of an Anglophone and French Canadian kind of mixed hybrid sort of accent. And then when I was in France, a lot of people would tell me like, "Oh, we don't say that word here," or "We don't. Oh,
Yeah.
why do we don't say it like that?" And I didn't know at the time that, when you're that young, you don't realize that it's an accentual difference. I thought it's a correct versus incorrect, or better
Oh.
versus worse. That's what I just didn't know. I didn't know any
Yeah.
better, so I changed it. I started to like, okay, I guess this is what I have to do, and now, that's kind of very formative years, and now that's how I speak. I could change it, I'm sure, but I have to.
Yeah.
Have
Well,
to
I have uh, sort of a similar story with Spanish. Is that over the course of Spanish is one of the languages that I speak fluently, one of the four that I'm fluent in, and I've had different accents depending on who I was around.
right.
So in the early stages. I practiced a lot with a lot of people from Spain who were working with me at the company that I was working for. There were a lot of Europeans there, and I spoke Spanish with a nice, central Spanish accent from Spain, and very recognizable. But then after that, I had some friends from different places all in Canada, but from different places in South America, Latin America, so from Mexico, from Colombia, and my accent switched completely, to the point that sometimes people will tell me, "Oh, okay, you sound like you're like a foreigner from Colombia," something like that. I have a little bit of an accent, but so it doesn't sound Spanish from Spain at all anymore. And then I went to Spain a little bit during this past trip, and it made me want to switch back, but it didn't. But I feel that okay, if I stayed there a few weeks or a few months, maybe it would toggle back again to a Spanish accent. So I don't know, but
It reminds me of like my grandparents are a very interesting example of this. My grandpa specifically, as I think about it. So we speak Gujarati. The dialect of Gujarati we speak comes from a very particular region of Gujarat, mixed with a little bit of an African influence, because my grandparents grew up in Uganda.
okay.
And so that's kind of their, let's call it their default way of speaking. The second they speak to someone who's from the city, or from the city, let's say, or not from that region, unconsciously, completely unconsciously, they switch to a more city dialect, and not where they're from in India. They don't even realize that they do it. It's not even something they consciously do. And it reminds me of what you're saying about when you're in Spain, you picked up more of a Spain accent, then you switched to a different accent. When you went back to Spain, you almost wanted to switch back to how you used to speak. And it just reminds me of that.
Yeah. Actually, I should say that even for my own native language, French, I have this issue since I was born in France. But I've lived, the past 19 years of my life in Quebec, and usually the way I speak in the Montreal context is a little bit different from the way I grew up speaking, or the way I speak when I visit France, which I do, fairly often still. So it's not a complete switch, but it's several adaptations. People, for instance, who've watched Facebook Lives, the LangFest Lives in French that we've done in the past, but from France, have noticed. It was like, hey, I didn't know you spoke like that. I was like, oh, yeah, it sort of depends on the context, but yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's kind of the dilemma I have in Mandarin now. So for most of my studies, I've studied with people from China, usually northern China. So call it Beijing area, things like that. So that's just been yeah. And then I went to Taiwan, and obviously it's not like that at all. And now it's funny, because in Taiwan I definitely switched. I would speak more of a Taiwanese manner than, let's call it, a Beijing manner. And now the question for me becomes, when I speak, which one feels more natural, and I can't choose. I think it depends on who I'm speaking with, which is an interesting position to be in.
Would you say the Mandarin from Taiwan is easier to understand as a language learner? I mean, I grew up in Taiwan, so for me, the Beijing accent is a little difficult because there's so much tongue
Twisting.
Is it twisting? I don't know. The rolling, Spencer.
Reflections, the
Yeah.
technical word.
So it really makes the articulation difficult. I find, but still.
To understand, you mean?
I mean,
For
compared to other areas, I would say. I mean, compared to Shanghainese. I mean, not the language Shanghainese, but the folks from Shanghai. I mean, I can understand easier than Mandarin, even though I mean, it's like Quebecer and French. I'm so used to Quebecer French that I just understand it much better than I can even say this about English, right? I mean, English being my first language, but when I hear a British really get on a heavy accent, it costs me some energy to understand it.
Sounds like just wherever you grew up or whatever you're used to is what would be easier.
Yeah, so that's why I'm trying to see if, as a learner, if you've been exposed to two as an adult.
One thing I suppose I could say is that Taiwanese Mandarin, now whether this makes it easier or harder, I don't know, but it's an interesting thing to point out, would have less sounds than a Mandarin from, let's call it, Beijing. So for example,
sounds, okay.
Because it's, I think phonemes would be the technical word, but so think about it in mainland China, or let's call it Beijing, or even mainland as a whole, actually. If you look at a zh, right, versus a z, or a sh versus a s, right? Those are two very distinct sounds. In Taiwan, sometimes it can be, but often, whether it's a sh or a s, they'll often, it won't really make a big difference. Whether you say 我是 or 我是, you'll be understood either way. So I think, I don't know if that makes it easier or harder, but there are, there's definitely less sounds in Taiwan.
All right.
So.
All right. I mean, we could go on forever, but time is winding down. So let's sort of switch gears into Azren and Azren's projects. We know you're going to be a speaker at LangFest, and you will be giving us an introduction to Gujarati, right?
Yep.
But other than that, Azren, the language teacher, the language nerd, but the language teacher and the language professional. I don't know if you want to talk to us a little bit about your online presence, or your mid to long-term future. What's coming up? Let's spend a few minutes about that.
Sure. Biggest stuff online would be my podcast, so the language learning show, the content I post on if you're on the most major social networks, so Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, yes, and then podcast, obviously. And it's all at Polyglot Azren, so Polyglot, AZ or Z, REN. That's most of my online stuff. So I share my own personal language learning journey, different pieces of advice that come up along the way. And it's kind of my focus online. In terms of where my focus is right now, there's no real major projects because my focus is just, I'm self-employed. So making sure that, making sure that I can pay the bills every month and make sure that my own.
And that's mainly through teaching English or Spanish or whatever languages you're
I find mostly French and Spanish nowadays, but some English as well.
All right.
Well, that's the major stuff.
And looking forward to LangFest. When are you coming into town?
I will be there I haven't bought the flight ticket yet. But I will be there from most likely the Wednesday of that LangFest week.
Good.
So Wednesday or the Thursday morning.
At some of the social activities, then that's good.
So a day or two before.
Oh, come on in on Tuesday. I mean, Tuesday night we kick it off with Mundo Lingo.
Oh yeah,
That's a place where you can meet a lot of
yeah,
language
that's true.
nerds.
I've been to the events before. It's fun. They're fun.
Alrighty, and we've discussed a little bit about you helping us out with leading some language tables. So we'll keep that discussion going. We will.
For sure.
We're looking at probably setting up some tables with different languages, and hopefully see you leading some of those tables.
For sure.
All right. So this is
Cool.
Azren, the language nerd. We can find him on @polyglot_Azren. I guess if you Google that, all your social media accounts
Or
will come
the
up.
Language Learning Show, which is the podcast, which you'll find as well.
All right. Well, that's good. So I'd like to remind our listeners and audience that we will be at Université de Montréal this year. And our keynote speakers are David J. Peterson and Mark Okren. If you're not familiar with these names, I'm sure you're familiar with Dothraki, the constructed language in the Game of Thrones, and also Klingon, the other constructed language in Star Trek. So these folks created these languages, so we'll be very keen on finding out how they've done so and created such successful languages. So that's what's coming up, and all the schedule is now on our website at langfest.org, and all the speakers. There are a few holes that we have to fill with the bios and the descriptions and whatnot, but the main parts are there. So definitely go take a look. If you haven't bought a ticket yet, definitely consider purchasing as soon as possible, as the prices go up with each price group that gets sold out. So hopefully I'll see you all at LangFest, and we will see you on this channel and on both Facebook and on YouTube next week at the same time, Friday at noon Eastern time. Any last words, guys? I'm ready to go to bed. It's
Oh yeah, right.
Taiwan there.
12:36
Yep.
a.m. here. So you guys have a nice weekend, and a nice weekend to all our listeners and audience, and we'll see you next week.
Great.
Bye bye
you.
now.
See ya.